So we will resume the draft here with the Pittsburgh Steelers on the clock at pick 21. Feel like they could take a corner here. Okay, so they go Malachi Starks, safety. Walter Nolan goes to the Chargers. The Packers go with Calvin Banks, a tackle from Texas. The Vikings go with the running back Amarian Hampton from North Carolina. Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama, goes to Houston. And Emeka Egbuka goes to the Rams at 26. Nick Emanwari goes to the Ravens at 27. James Pierce goes to the Lions at 28. And then Colston Loveland, the aforementioned Colston Loveland, goes to the Commanders at 29, bringing us to the Buffalo Bills at pick 30. So, as you can see on my chart here, Luther Burden III is the best available player, Josh Simmons. But here's the thing. People say all the time, and the Bills say all the time, they want to go with the best player available. But I think that there is a big asterisk by that because I think you need to say the best player available based on your team needs. Because, yeah, sure, it'd be great to get another wide receiver, and I think that is a position of need, but is that as big of a need as cornerback right now or defensive line, specifically defensive tackle? Josh Allen just proved this past year that he could win the MVP without these top wide receivers, without a wide receiver one, with that everybody eats mentality. So for me, I'm going to wait until at least round 2 for a wide receiver. A tackle, Josh Simmons, yeah, he seems to be a nice prospect, but Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Tylen Grable, Ryan Vandermark, I don't think you need a tackle here, right? So I'm going to go to corner and defensive tackle immediately because there are already a couple prospects that I can see here that I'm going to be interested in. So you have Derek Harmon from Oregon, and then we'll put in cornerback as well. So there we go. Those are probably the 3 picks right there. Siobhan Ravel, Derek Harmon, and Trey Amos. Now, this is tough because you would love to have all those players, right? But you can only have one. Now, you could trade back into the second round and try to give yourself that extra ammunition like I was talking about, but I don't think the Bills can get too picky here. You know, they did that last year. I don't know if we can count on them doing that 2 years in a row. And say what you want about the whole Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman trade, but after the backlash that they faced and people are saying, well, you gave Kansas City Xavier Worthy, and look who's picking right after you at pick 31. I don't think they're going to want to do that again. So I think they're going to take the pick here. At least that's what I'm going to do. And this is tough because do you want that big space eater like Derek Harmon? And as much as I've heard that he could be a 1 tech, I've also heard that he could play the 3 tech. So he seems like a versatile defensive tackle, and I think that's what you need because really I think you need that 1 tech. You need that Daquan Jones replacement as he is 33 years old, coming up on an expiring contract. So you have to build for the future while also building for the present because you need that rotation, especially with Larry Ogunjobi being on that 6-game suspension, likewise with Michael Hoyt. Right now, you're thin on that defensive line. So, yeah, Ed Oliver can be the 3 tech. You have Dwayne Carter coming back in his sophomore campaign here. And then Daquan Jones. But, again, what do you have after that? So that's why I am really enticed by Derek Harmon. But it's hard to pass up on Trey Amos when right now the Bills really only have Christian Benford as a boundary corner. They traded away Kyer Elam. They haven't re-signed Russell Douglas. So this is where I think you could go after someone like Trey Amos here. And I think if you could pair him with Christian Benford, there is your cornerback combination for the next 5 years. Lockdown, CB1, CB2. I think Amos has a lot of traits that the Bills would like. I think he's athletic. He can play in this zone-heavy system from Sean McDermott. I think he could be a perfect player to pair opposite Benford. But it's just so hard to go against Derek Harmon. So I think because of that, I'm going to go with Derek Harmon. Just because at the end of the year, what I was saying and what a lot of other people were saying was that the Bills need to build through their defensive line. Look what Philadelphia did to Kansas City. They decimated them in that Super Bowl. They didn't even blitz once, and they got Mahomes on the ground 6 times. They just kept building and building through the draft. They take some pieces in free agency, but they just kept hammering it home in the draft. And you could really see it come to fruition in the playoffs, quintessentially in the Super Bowl. So just because the Bills haven't re-signed Rasul Douglas yet, or they didn't sign Asante Samuel Jr., I don't want to stray away from that and get scared and say, oh, I think we have to go get a corner now. So I'm going to go with Derek Harmon here because I think that the Bills finally need to put some capital into this defensive line. And by that, I mean go after that big one tech because they've been piecing it together with guys like Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson and Linval Joseph, Poona Ford, who for whatever reason couldn't work out in Buffalo, but he's been great ever since. Tim Settle, I know he wasn't necessarily a one tech, but just all these guys that have been rotating through. You know, how many reunions have they had with Shaq Lawson? Again, he's an edge defender, but still, the point remains. So I think they need to get a cost-controlled, very good defensive tackle. And then I think you could potentially mess around in round 2. And by that, I mean maybe use some of that ammunition to move up to get a corner. Maybe you can still get Trey Amos. Maybe someone like Maxwell Hairston is there or Benjamin Morrison. I really like Darian Porter. So I think as much as you would like the depth with defensive tackle, because going into this, I was thinking, okay, I might want to draft a corner first, and then there's more depth with defensive tackles. But I don't know if you can pass on someone like Derek Harmon. So that being said, let's draft Harmon and see what they say. So right after, the Chiefs get an edge defender, Nick Scorton. And I didn't see who that last one is, but let's see. They are grading our draft. The pick is in with Derek Harmon, and we will see how it turns out here. Okay, so they gave us a solid B. Now, they are saying that I should have drafted Josh Simmons, but again, the Bills don't need an offensive tackle. Maybe they can get one on Saturday, but not in round 1. So rather than addressing the offensive line, I address the defensive line. So based on this, I would say we made out very well, but I am a little bit concerned with this corner position. I really narrowed it down to Kenneth Grant and Derek Harmon. If they're there, I think you have to take them. But if they're drafted higher than 30, I think that's where you have to go with the corner. So let's get to know a little bit more about Derek Harmon. So I pulled up his profile here on NFL.com, and as you can see, his hometown is Detroit, Michigan, so hopefully the Lions don't want to take him 28th overall. But Harmon is 6'4.5", 313 pounds, and he has some incredible athleticism for that size, as his 40 time was clocked at 4.95, and his 10-yard split was 1.74. So this just seems like that classic explosive disruptor that the Bills have been seeking for so long on that defensive line. Now, Harmon is a redshirt junior, so he played his first 3 seasons at Michigan State, and he was a solid defensive tackle, but nothing special. So in his 3 seasons, he compiled 71 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks. But he really didn't pop off until he transferred to Oregon in 2024, and that is when he had 45 tackles and 5 sacks to go along with 4 passes defended. But even more impressive, Harmon had 11 tackles for a loss. His pressure rate of 10.7% ranked second amongst defensive tackles in all of college football, and he had the most pressures by a defensive tackle with 55. So because of that, that is why he is surging in all these mock drafts, because I've seen mocks where he's going all the way as high as pick number 15. So if you notice over to the right-hand side here, they're saying that his prospect grade is 6.3, and he will eventually be a plus starter. Now, that doesn't necessarily jump off the page at you and read as if he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer and a perennial Pro Bowler, or All-Pro, should I say. But I think once we get into some of these strengths, you're going to understand why this could be such a great pick for the Bills. Now, this was all written by Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, and he says that Harmon is a position-versatile building block that makes moving the football a much tougher task. Harmon is wide, long, and naturally powerful at the point of attack. He can play up and down the line in both odd and even fronts. He will bring an instant dose of stinginess and toughness to any defense he joins. And oddly enough, who does Zierlein compare him to? One Daquan Jones. And now for some of his strengths. So Harmon has an exceptional blend of size, length, and strength that make him tough to move. He has the versatility to play up and down the line in odd or even fronts. His punch is quick, powerful, and efficient to stall the block, and he is capable as a block collector to keep his linebackers clean. And that is one of my favorite strengths about him, because I feel like that is such an underrated aspect, because the Bills have been trying to keep their linebackers clean for how long? You know, even going back to Star Lotulelei and all those other defensive tackles that I mentioned. And now that they have Terrell Bernard, who, don't get me wrong, is a great linebacker. He's a modern day NFL linebacker. He's very athletic. He has great instincts, but he is undersized for his position. So I think it's so important that if you can find this defensive tackle who can take on potentially multiple blockers and clean those lanes for Terrell Bernard to go track down the ball carrier, or Matt Milano for that matter, who's getting up there in age. I just think that it's so important that you have this disruptor up front because that's where I think it all starts. Everything starts up front because if you get that interior pressure, it'll make everything easier on the back end. It'll make things easier for your linebackers. And then conversely, it'll make things easier for your secondary. So that's pretty much the reason why I didn't elect to draft a cornerback with the 30th overall pick here. And as we get into some of these other prospects, I'll just read what PFF wrote about Savon Revel because I know that he is right on the big board. He's ranked 26, so he could be right in that range for the Bills. But this is what I don't like about him. So they say that Revel is the ideal day 2 athletic alien to draft and develop despite inconsistent anticipation and technique in his current form. His physical gifts, including height and length, point to press man coverage being his home in the NFL, but it will be quite the adjustment for him to go from 1 year of starting experience in the AAC to the NFL, especially off a torn ACL. So that just kind of screams Kaiir Elam to me. And I don't want to draft another corner based on his athletic abilities who can't develop in your system, because that is just what we went through with Elam. And then you throw on top of it his injury history here. Those are just too many red flags for me. Now, Trey Amos is someone who I think is a perfect pair for Christian Benford, and PFF says that Amos brings an ideal blend of size, movement skills, and coverage scheme versatility to the cornerback position. While his explosiveness and speed aren't anything special, his 2024 film shows he has a CB2 floor in the NFL with the potential to be a CB1. And that is totally fine with me because the Bills just locked up Christian Benford for another 4 years. So he is CB1. You're not asking this guy to come in and shut down those opposing wide receiver ones right off the bat. Now, yeah, you're going to want him to play up to that standard, but for the time being, he can just be a comfortable CB2. So that was my thought process here behind drafting Derek Harmon, 30th overall for the Buffalo Bills. Let me know, how did I do? What do you think? What would you have done? Is there someone else that you would have selected? Let me know in the comments. And of course, go Bills.